Hello, everyone, and as always, welcome back to Strategy Gaming Dojo, where we find, learn, and play one more turn of the great strategy games. Now, today we're going to continue on with our basic tutorial for Gary Grigsby's War in the East. This is episode number 4, and in this episode, we're going to cover quite a few things. I'm going to circle back on some things, but this episode is really going to focus on unit statistics, the back of the baseball card, as I call it. If you look at a unit and you right click on this pane over here, you will see the back of the baseball card. And this will have all of the stats about that unit, what makes up the unit. So we're going to go into that today. But before I get there, as usual, I like to, as I said, circle back and talk about some things that maybe are just housekeeping or things I want to correct or things that I have thought about and thought, well, maybe I should have covered this in the last episode. So sometimes I'll go back and edit those episodes as time goes by, but I also want you, if you're following along and you think, well, I've already watched episode 2, I don't need to go back and watch that. I like to do it right here at the start of episode 4 and let you know maybe just some more information about certain things. One thing that I wanted to point out before we go any further, and you actually can't see this because of my recording software, but up here in the top left of your game, you should see the version number that you're playing. I am playing version number 1.12.06, and that is most likely not the version number that you have. If you're playing this on Steam, that is not the one that automatically loads up. What you'll have to do if you want to advance on, and I'll explain this in a second, is on Steam you can sign up for beta versions. Many of you probably know how to do this, but you go to a tab on the game. I think you right click on the game and then you go down to preferences, and in one of those tabs it has the beta allows you to say, okay, I'm fine with playing a beta version. Now, what has happened with this game is, this obviously came out some time ago. I'm not going to guess on the exact year. It was before 2015, let's put it that way. There has been very good support of this game by Matrix, by 2 by 3 and they've constantly patched it, and eventually they got it to a point where they say, okay, well enough. We're going to leave well enough alone. The game really, now we're just starting to move things around for willy-nilly reasons. Um, but as time goes on, people find more things that maybe just need small patches or little problems, or sometimes it's game balancing. Anyway, if you've watched my War in the Pacific videos, you know that we're playing a beta version of that game because at some point Matrix stopped putting out new patches, but they did allow one of the previous developers or a huge fan of the game to put out another patch. And that patch is not necessarily sanctioned by Matrix, but they don't disapprove of it either. I mean, they allow it to be pinned up to the top of the forum for that game. Well, this game is exactly like that in War in the East. There have actually been quite a few improvements made in 2019, in 2020. As a matter of fact, the last patch of this, I think, was just in December of 2020, that there were a few little things that were tweaked here and there. So after that long spiel, the point is I'm playing 1.12.06. You can get that version by if you're playing in the Steam, if you have this through Steam, you can do it by enabling beta. If not, I believe if you got this originally from Matrix way back in the day and you just have this through Matrix, I think that you can download that what they're calling a beta patch, the '06 patch. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Oh, one other housekeeping item. Let's go down here to this Polizea SS Polizia? Polizia. Let's call it Polizia SS Infantry Division. Before anyone else says anything more on this. I understand it's not a Polish division, and I'm very sorry if I gave that impression. I guess in the first or second episode when I used this as an example, it Polizia in German evidently means police. Okay. Now I did not think this was a unit of Polish troops running around. I just meant that they had been formed in Poland, but evidently it doesn't have anything to do with Poland. It's police. Okay, so it's a police SS division. Apologies. Hey, I used to live in Chicago. I understand the Polish reticence to being in any way associated with the German military. I totally understand that was inadvertent. Um, Moving on from that, oh, that actually allows me, this unit though allows me to point out one thing. Now, we talked about different kinds of units, and there were a couple of units I wanted to circle back and talk about. One is these SS divisions. Now, as you play the game, you'll also see the Soviets get a similar type of division called guards units, and they will be bright red. So the typical Russian unit is this kind of drab brown, while our units are this grayish color. But then we have what are considered special or elite units, like these SS units. And you can tell them because they have black like this. Here's another one, the Totenkopf SS Motorized Division, that is black uh, in the counter. These are elite special units. The main difference with them is they have a higher morale starting, and we're going to talk about morale in this episode. Morale is probably the most important factor for combat units, and these special elite units have a higher morale. Now, for the Germans, the SS units have a 5 point higher morale in 1941, and then it becomes 10 and then 15 higher as the game goes on. Uh, Again, we'll get into morale and we'll talk about national morale, which kind of is the baseline for all of your units' morale. But I just did want to point out these special SS units. They're considered elite or, maybe just special, or hey, psychopathic, if you will. But they start off with a higher morale than other units in the game as a base. Okay, and we have several of these across the map. You see another one here. Here's the Das Reich SS motorized, and so again, it's a morale difference, really. But the second type of unit I wanted to point out this time that I didn't talk about last time are these security units. Okay, and these security units, pretty easy to see, right? SEC here. They're kind of their own kind of bird in that they do have, they have about 5,000 men, 50 guns. They're not insignificant, but you'll see here they have a 1 combat value. And as you may have guessed just by their name, they are really meant to be garrison units. When you take Russian towns, based on the size of the town, whether it be a city, so let's look at Vilnius here. I believe Vilnius is a city. Oh, I've got Fog of War on. Maybe it'll tell me here. Yes, Vilnius is a city. Okay. Generally, and this is generally speaking, a city will need 4,000 garrison troops in it. Okay. So, as I said, this security unit here has over 4,000. So we would be good using this security unit to garrison Vilnius. All right. Let's go to Minsk, though. Minsk is light urban. Light urban Soviet towns need 8,000 men to garrison them. All right. And then major urban areas. I think Smolensk is light urban, so we'll just go all the way to Moscow. Moscow is heavy urban. Heavy urban needs 12,000 garrison troops. So if we were to take Moscow, we would need the equivalent, and you'll see why I said that word here in a minute, of 12,000 garrison troops. Okay, let's go back to our security unit. The special thing about security units is they get double the amount of men for counting purposes. So you remember how I said Minsk needs 8,000 because it's light urban? This unit has 4,778. You double that because it's a security unit under the theory that these units are specially trained to be garrison units. That's what they're supposed to do. They're not trained to, overrun fortifications, to, attack, defend. They're really like police units. So these special security units double their amount of manpower for garrison responsibilities. So we will be taking, and you see here, so this is a different, this is in orange. So they've been given different colors, and they have a headquarters. So you see the 101st, these were special German units, RHG command, and this is a acronym based on a German word that I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but there are these RHG commands, so they're treated exactly the same way. You'll see this 285th Security Division has to be within 15 of this RHG command to get the benefit of all of the various benefits of being within command. Okay. Sometimes that's very hard to do because we don't have enough security units, except what we can always do is break these down. And if we break, for instance, this guy down into three, each one will have about 3,000 troops, right? But remember, we double their effectiveness. So we can put them in these smaller cities to run garrison for us. All right. And we'll get into that more later as we start to play the game. But these garrison units, you don't want to be using these for any kind of attack or maybe to defend something if you have no other choice, right? But they're really police units. They're meant to be garrisons in towns, and they get double when they are performing that duty. So I did want to mention that. All right, so we've knocked off three. I have a list of like 13 things that I wanted to circle back to. I'm not sure if I'll get back to all of them this time. I may save some of them because I'm really trying to keep these to an hour. And you know, this is just kind of recapping. Some of it's even more advanced than I would want to do in a basic tutorial. All of this game kind of works together though, and if you don't know one aspect, it may affect other things. So I'm trying to cover what I think is important. Um, I did want to mention that there are static units or frozen units. They're kind of two different concepts, but at the start they're sort of the same. So let's go back to this unit here. This unit has 0 movement points. Now we're in the first turn of the game. Um, Equate this to if you've played any other war game. This is a fixed unit at the start of the game that may or may not get released at some point. Some of these headquarters, that are back here, may just never get released, but some of these units might. And the way you can tell that, and now I can't move my cursor here and point to it, otherwise the tooltip will come down. But if you go down the tooltip where it says 143rd Static Division, well, that gives us a pretty good indication it's static. But static, anything that's static, there are special rules around it. How supply works. They don't take as much supply. They fortify differently. I'm not going to get all deep into that in a basic tutorial. We've got other things to worry about first, but I did want to point out if you look across Unit 4551, 143rd Static, if you go past the parens there, you see FZN67, and that means this will be frozen for 67 turns. Okay, And so, presumably, on the 68th turn, it will become unfrozen. Or if enemy units get close enough to it, it becomes unfrozen. If it gets attacked, obviously, it becomes unfrozen. Kind of like every other fixed unit rules that you've ever played. But this will be stuck here for a minimum of 67 turns unless something happens to it triggered by the Soviets. So I just wanted to point that out. So that's static. Um, I'm going to wait on fortified and fortifying. We have this create fortified unit. We can do that with our current units. This really comes into play as the Axis player when you switch from being offensive to being defensive. Now, hopefully that never happens, right? We're always on the offense. We keep the initiative. We push the Russians all the way back to the Ural Mountains and, into Asia. But realistically, at some point, the war will start to turn based on the Soviets' massive manpower and production advantages that start to, show themselves in 42 and 43. And when that happens, we will want to start setting down, and especially in the winter, excuse me, in the mud and in the winter, we will want to start setting down fortified units. So let's just see. I don't even know if we can do one back here. I guess, yes, we can build a fortified zone. It costs 4 admin points, AP. Now, I think I was calling these political points because that's what they're called in War in the Pacific. It's the exact same concept, but for some reason in War in the East, they call these admin points. Sure, it's fine, whatever. You only have so many of these, of course. You gain so many per turn, and that waxes and wanes for the Germans and the Soviets based on the year, or sometimes it happens in the middle of the year, but as the Germans, as you might suspect, you're getting more, and then as the war goes on, you're getting less. With the Russians, just the opposite, as in most things on the Eastern Front. Uh, you know, it waxes and wanes with the fortunes historically of the war. But we're going to change history, aren't we? Um, so those are fortified units. Again, I'm going to be doing a let's play of this game. At about turn 18, things start to get muddy. And if you aren't already, well, even if you are already at Moscow and Leningrad and Rostov and all of these places, you are going to start setting up fortified zones and getting behind them and getting your panzers or anything motorized into to cities, you know, best case scenario, or into towns at least, something to protect them. But that's a weather discussion. I just wanted to talk about that, and I also wanted to talk about the fact that, and we'll get into this as we get to the back of these cards. Every unit has a construction value, and so every unit is when it does not move, or even if it moves and it has movement points left and does not move anymore, it will start digging in a hex. So if a unit sits still for a whole turn, it's digging in. If it moves to here and it still has 12 movement points, it digs in, on a percentage basis less of how many movement points it used. So there is quote unquote entrenchment, right? And we see that in fort level. And I've talked a little bit about fort level. What is it here? Yeah, fort levels. And you see our fort levels. We are going to go deeper into that in a different episode, but that question had come up. What are these fort levels exactly? And really, what they are, think of them as entrenchment levels. They go from 1 to 5. In World War II, there wasn't, well, entrenchment maybe isn't the right way to say it. In World War II, there was not the entrenchment like you saw in World War One, right, where they're just digging huge trenches that they fortify with wood and whatnot. In World War II, it was a little more sophisticated than that. You had all kinds of anti-tank stuff going on, things that would throw tanks off their tracks. You had, spikes, you had just, this is an abstraction of all of that fort level. Okay, so it's not just like they dig a trench, it's digging in. Maybe we can call it that. But well, hell, let's call it fortifying, right? It's fort level. Um, Now that is different than building a fortified unit. Okay, this fort level is their level of digging in. And again, they units do that automatically. When they stop in a hex, they start building. But we're going to talk about this because every unit has a construction value that you see right here. And that construction value goes into them starting to build a fort level in every hex where they rest, assuming they have movement points left. Okay. Wow. We're moving through things. Um, National morale and elite units. We kind of talked about elite units. I'm going to talk about national morale when we talk about each unit's morale. Oh, better CV. This is something I wanted to circle back to. I've already circled back to it once, but I wanted to circle back to it a second time because I've really read through the rule book on this point and asked a couple of people exactly. Um, Remember in the preferences screen, we talked about, is it preferences? No, this is how no, that's right. Um, no, it's not. Shoot. I always get these mixed up for some reason. CV mode we have in default right now. Better CV math. That's how I want to play the game or how I always play the game. What exactly does that mean? Better CV math, the default is how the game was originally put out. Better CV math, what it does is it takes in your leadership abilities, morale, experience. It takes into account those things when calculating the CV value that you see. So it makes it more exact as to what it will actually be when you go into combat. Okay. And I don't think I explained that well last time. I said, well, it's got some other factors and it makes it better. Very generic. Better CV math is going to take into account all of the different factors that go into what your actual combat, your modified combat value will be when you go into an actual combat, as opposed to just saying, oh, well, this unit has so many rifle squadrons um, or platoons. So its CV is this. This says, well, they're this fatigued, they have this much experience. This is actually closer to what their real CV is. Now it has you have different um, options to go along with that. All this means is artillery counts as one CV, support units count as zero. Support units that are directly attached to the unit um, and then you can do that with better CV math. Artillery's one, support units directly attached count as one. This is beyond where we are. And I guess that's why I was struggling a little bit explaining it because it's a little bit beyond where we are for a basic tutorial. But I did want to say, honestly, it's better Fog of War to play default as far as you don't know nearly as well how good your combat value is. When you play better CV math, you have a much better idea of what your combat value will be when you actually go into combat. Okay? As part of that, this question came up from someone. Why is this showing, even though it's this infantry unit, why is it showing 3850? Like we have a combat value of 38 and a movement of 50 for this unit. I thought that infantry units could only go 16. Well, as you can see, they can. When units are stacked, it adds up the combat value. Now, headquarters have zero, of course, but when units are stacked, it adds up their combat value, 38. So 19 plus 19 plus 0, 38. And it shows the highest movement points MPs left for any individual unit. So we've got 16, 16, 50. it shows 50. It shows your highest movement points and it adds up combat value. That brings me to another point, which is in this game, no matter the size of the unit, what kind of unit it is, it does not matter whether it be elite, infantry, a regiment, these regiments down here where we've broken up divisions, you can only put three cards, three counters in any one hex. All right. Now, units can move over a three counter hex. So if we wanted to move this infantry unit over to here, it could, it could go here for one and then hop over here. So it doesn't impede movement, but you could not have it just sit here. You couldn't have it, well, heck, let's just do it. If we tried to move it here, it won't let us do it. But if we try to, well, here it's going to route around because of the movement points. Let's see if it matters. See, it routes around here. Um, that's because there's more movement points in here. But the point being is, if it needed to move over this guy, it could. It will go over units to get where it needs to go, even if there are three in that hex. But there is a maximum of three no matter what. Um, Gosh, I could make a whole episode in just these things. These are just like should call this like intermediate helpful tips, right? I should just make this a smaller episode called helpful tips. Maybe I'll do that. We're almost like 30 minutes into this thing. Um, Better CV, Frozen. Oh, pop up. I wanted to talk more and let's get off that mode. I wanted to talk more about pop-ups. And I keep going back to these police division here. Um, these pop-ups give you quite a bit of information, and I don't really think we've talked much about it, okay? Um, and it's hard I'm used to pointing to exactly what I'm talking about, but it's hard here because if I get off of it, the tooltip pops off. So these tooltips will tell you so much about the hex, right? It tells you this hex is light woods, and it will do that. If you settle over a hex, it will tell you all about that hex. Light woods, what the hex location is. Minor river is to the west, okay, and you see that here. So this minor river is to the west. Now, if you look here, when we do this, it shows you minor river is to the west, the northwest, and the northeast. And then it also tells you what directions rail runs out of this hex. So east, southeast, west, northwest. Then you see fort level. So this game has changed over the years. They used to not give you this level of detail, I don't believe, where they would do it down to the hundredth of a decimal point. But this gives you the fort level. Now, the one on the left is how much you've built it up, or this unit or any units in the hex have built it up. And the one to the right is how much it is because it's a town. A town will have a natural fort level. And so let's maybe go to a bigger town here. Whoops. Warsaw. You'll see here, this has been built up to a 1.10. The natural fort level of the city of Warsaw is 3.10. Okay. It'll also tell you who controls this rail. And that becomes important, and we'll talk a lot about this in our supply episode, but that becomes very important for supply and what's considered a railhead or a major supply point. So we'll talk more about that. Then you'll see off-rail movement points and off-rail range. Again, that's for the supply episode. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole here, but it's safe to say if they're showing you this on the pop-up, it's important how far you are off rail in movement points and in the number of hexes, which is what range is. is very important to how many trucks you're going to have to use out of your vehicle pool, and you always want to be using the fewest number of trucks possible. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk, so that's pop-ups. Pop-ups will tell you all sorts of things. Let's go to one with a unit, actually. This will show us, so let's pop this up. I want to make sure. Yep. Let's pop this one up and let's go over the tooltip. We're in a clear hex. You see the hex location. You see where the minor river is, and you can see that minor river flowing through there, right? It's to the east, the northwest, because it does go back behind us and to the left, and the northeast. It shows you rail goes from east to west across. The fort level, all right. Um, Axis rail, so we control this. We control the rail line here. Makes sense. It's in our hex. Then you see the unit. So it gives it that identification number. It tells you it is part of the 16th Army. All right. It tells you there's one combat unit and 8 support units. Well, let's go look at that for a second. Um, Well, we're actually, I'm not going to. I'm not going to go look at that because we're going to talk about that in the next uh, episode. You see that the commanding officer is General Ernst Busch. So, as you see, it gives you a lot of information about this unit. And it will tell you, oh, we were on the headquarters. I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't look like the unit I'm actually trying to. There we go. Okay, let's actually go back here for a second and look at this again. So it's the 16th Army. It gives you the name of the unit. I was like, yeah, I confused myself. I'm sorry. Um, it is the 16th Army. It is one command unit and 8 support units. It has 50 movement points and it has 0 special movement points. We'll talk about that, or strategic movement points. And this is Bush. He's a 6600. We'll get into that when we talk about leaders. Okay, and so if we click on here, it is one combat unit, right? Because it's just this one headquarters unit. And here you see the support units that it considers support units for that calculation that says that it's 8. All right, so that's the pop-ups. Now, one other thing, I say one other thing, this is item 10 on my list I wanted to talk about, are these soft unit factors, right? We talked about how you can change the left arrows here. We've got uh, units attached. We've got nothing if we want nothing. We've got morale. We've got experience, and so on and so forth. These colors. So the question came up, well, that's all well and good. What do these colors mean? So for any of these things you pick, um, a bright green, so a bright green color is going to mean 80, I'm looking at my notes here, 85% or above. All right? That's bright green. So 85% or above. And if we look, the experience on these elements does bring it to an 85 if you averaged all of those. So that's bright green when we have it on morale. Um, well, I'm going to keep it on morale because it shows a lot of the different ones here. So 85% or above is bright green. Dark green is 71 to 85. Of course, this is on a 1 to 100 scale, 100 being the best. Um, and so dark green is 71 to 85. I think we have some dark green ones here. This looks dark green to me. If we look at the experience, this is just below. If you average these together, evidently, it's just below 85. And so it's 71 to 85 or to 84, I guess you would say. Um, and it's dark green. The next level down is yellow, and yellow is 56 to 70. Orange is 41 to 55, and so here's an orange one down here. Let's right click on that. And if you look at the experience levels of the elements and average those all together, it would be 50. And so it's orange because orange is 41 to 55. And then red is 40 or below. Um, so it kind of, it goes from green to yellow to orange to red as you get worse, right? That's kind of common sense. You can look at them very quickly here and say, oh, green, green, good. We got an orange here, not so good. This really comes in handy when you're looking at supply. Now, of course, on the first turn, we're going to be in very good supply, so it's not a huge issue. Um, oh, you know what? I think with that, I'm going to well, let's go ahead and get to the back of the card. Nope, I'm going to stop this episode here. And I'm just going to call this, episode 3B or something, and say helpful tips to go back and think about what we've been talking about up to this point. Most of these things are things that came up based on what we had talked about. And so I think I'm just going to leave it right here. And then I'll come back and do an episode number 4 where we really get onto the back of these units, get onto the back of these units, look at the back of their card, their unit card, and start talking about what all of these things mean, how they work, and we'll go from there. All right. So as always, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I hope hopefully this was very helpful. Heck, this is some stuff that I hadn't thought about in a very long time. And so, as I always say, I learned something from these probably as much as you do. For Strategy Gaming Dojo, thank you so much. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.